fun? I'm absolutely delighted that you decided to take time out of your busy schedules to come and be with us. And so I thank you. So what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to give yourself a round of applause. Now, we're here today to discuss a subject that is and should be extremely important to every community, not only in the state of Pennsylvania, but every community in the United States of America. Because we have a problem. And the problem is that the issue of childhood sexual abuse is not getting better. In fact, I think it's getting worse. And I do believe that as a family, as a community, I do believe it is my firm belief that we can and do something about it for the protection of children. See, because children, I believe the children cannot protect themselves adequately. That's why we are in their lives. Amen? Amen. And so, that's why we're here. Now, this problem is a growing problem. And in a minute, I'm going to introduce some of my guests. And it's an impressive list of individuals who have agreed to come and be with us. But the problem is, they in and of themselves can't solve this issue. Y'all agree with that?
Yeah.
No one entity can solve this issue. It's going to take a partnership. And that's what I want to talk to all of you about today. And I think the problem in the Norristown community is probably greater than you even imagine. Let me share with you why. Okay, Detective Anders is here. I need the young people are going to go downstairs with Detective Anders, and she's going to take care of you. So all my young folk, my teenagers, if y'all would go with her, and we will see you in about an hour. Detective, thank you. Awesome. My teenagers going. She's going to work with them downstairs. Yeah, right. Yeah. Dayton, you'll be there one day. You'll get there one day. Yeah. She's good for that. You'll take care of her once we break, okay? Now, let me share this with you. We are in the 19401 zip code, right? In terms of those who are registered pedophiles, or those who have violated in this area of childhood sexual abuse, how many do you think live in the 19401 zip code? Over 100. Anybody else? It's a guess. I won't lie. I mean, I know we have law enforcement here, but we won't arrest you if you're wrong. It's a guess. 50? Somebody say 50? Okay. Higher?
200.
How much? 200? Higher?
500.
Okay, lower. All right, here we go. Here we go. I'm going to put it on the screen for you. And I don't know if you can see this. You probably won't be able to see it. But I just want to make sure that I have it right. I don't want to misquote information. What's my cursor? All right. 395 registered. Do you know what that means? Let me take it off. 395 registered. Do you know what that means? No, yeah, there's going to be more. That's just those who go through the system. Okay? Yeah, ones we know about. In this community alone, not neighboring, 395 here. How many of you live in 19401? How many of you have young children, 19401? Grandkids? Yeah, okay? Is that something you need to know? Huh? Absolutely, absolutely. I was alerted to this issue, I believe it was 1994, my home state. There's a gentleman, Jesse, I'm forgetting his last name, moved into a neighborhood, and he moved in with two gentlemen who were already, he moved in a home where there were two registered sex offenders. And the community didn't know it. And right across the street was a family. They had an 8-year-old little girl. He lured her into the house, asking her if she wanted to see his puppy. And you know the rest of the story, right? As a result of that, there was a law put in place. What's the name of the law? Megan's Law. Okay, Megan Cannon. And so, I believe, now, I got my guest here, and she's going to walk you through a process. She's going to share a riveting personal story with you. And then I've got my other guests, they're going to share from their very own perspectives. And so I think that this is information that every family, especially with young children, needs to know. And we're going to talk to you today about today is the process of grooming, which is the process that every pedophile, every preterist, every predator uses to remove all hindrances and barriers from the victim so they can sexually abuse their victims and the families. Okay? And so if you've been targeted, you need to know that. If your child, your son, your daughter, your grandson, your granddaughter has been targeted, you absolutely want to know that ahead of time. So you can know the warning signs and signals, and you can insulate yourself and your family. Amen? Amen. And so we've got an awesome panel here today, and I'm going to allow my friends, my guests, to introduce themselves. Please stand up, friend. She was with me last week, did an awesome job. And your name is?
Michelle Christopko.
You're with?
Montgomery County Office of Children and Youth.
All right, we're going to hear from her a little bit later. Yes, do y'all want to come up? Or you want to say back? Yeah, come on up. I want to see the whites of your eyes. Awesome. Anywhere, please, you want to sit. Anywhere. Now, we're privileged today. I'm not even going to tell you what his name is or what office he's from, but he's pretty high on the list. Your name is?
Hi, I'm Bradford Richmond. I'm an assistant district attorney here in Montgomery County.
Be on your P's and Q's today. Don't mess with me for the next hour or so. I got backup. We have another awesome gentleman here who's here with us.
Detective Angel Lucy from the Norristown Police Department.
Thank you. We're going to have a presentation now. I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker who's going to come and address us. But at the end, I'm going to invite my guests to come up, and we're going to dialogue. I want you to ask them whatever questions that you need to know in this forum. And then after that, we're going to break up. They have a room prepared downstairs. And you'll be able to go from guest to guest, from expert to expert, and be able to talk to them about whatever you want to talk to them about. Okay? I'll share more about that. A year ago, I was in Florida. I just finished film school. And a speaker called me and said, Pastor, I'm in the process, I want to do a documentary. And I understand that, you know, you just finished film school, so I need you to help me. So I said, all right, tell me a little bit about the project. And she told me about the project, and her passion just came through the phone and grabbed me around the throat and said, you will do this. If you think I'm passionate about this subject, you haven't seen passion yet. You're going to be blessed. You're going to be blessed this evening. And so, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and invite Nicole Hodge. She's going to come, she's going to take it and share with us. Nicole? You don't.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to first thank Pastor again for having me, and also having us last week. We had a really good event also at Norristown Church. I am a product of Southwest Seventh-day Adventist Church. I've been a member since I was 4 years old. And my family has been Adventist since 1942, so I know what those are. I also want to thank everyone for coming out. You know, this is a difficult topic. Everyone in this room either knows someone who has been abused, or in some cases you've been abused yourself. So it is difficult. People don't like talking about it. You know, everyone's passionate about it to a certain extent, but no one really wants to take the extra step. Can you hear me okay? Really? How about now? Is this better? Okay, I'll speak up a little bit more too. So when we speak of child sexual abuse, my focus is not on fixing the abuse after it's happened. My focus is not on working with a victim. My focus is on true prevention. And for me, true prevention does not mean tell me when you've been touched, or if someone does this to you, or if someone says this to you, let me know. That's not true prevention. Prevention is stopping the grooming before it occurs. And anything other than that, in my opinion, is just a rescue mission. Once a child has been touched, they've been forever changed. So I will tell you what grooming is. Grooming is the only process that a predator uses that allows for the long-term sexual abuse of a child. I'm not talking about the percentage of children who are snatched or who are molested, you know, in a one-time occurrence, or child rape. I'm talking about the 95% of cases that involve someone they know, love, and trust. And that's the majority of the abuse that children face. So grooming is a method to carefully build the trust of a child, preparing the victim and the family. Families are groomed as well. Preparing the victim and the family for long-term abuse and lifetime silence. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. This is the next slide. By the grace of God, I was not abused. It's probably a miracle that I was not abused, because everything pointed to the fact that I should have been. In 2007, I met a sibling who I had not known previously. I knew that my biological father had other children. I was the oldest, and never had much contact with him. Just knew him on and off through the years. He would show up once in a while, every few years, every couple of years during my childhood. In 2007, I, for some reason, felt the need to look up a brother who I just knew his name, didn't know anything about him at all. His name is Mark White. So I looked him up, found him. Our families got to know each other over the course of a year. Seemed like a wonderful person. He had a stepdaughter, a son, a wife, and lovely home. Just everything seemed to be nice. And I was actually pretty happy that I met this sibling. You know, because not very often do you meet someone that you think that you could possibly have a long-term relationship with when it's a family member that you did not grow up with. So I met Mark, and for the course of the entire year, 2007 to 2008, we got to know each other. We met each other's families. And the following Thanksgiving, he was going to come to my home. So he didn't show up on Thanksgiving, and I wondered why. And I gave it a week, then I gave him a phone call, and couldn't reach him. And so his wife, I finally got in contact with her. Her name is Tanya, and I said, where's Mark? You guys didn't show up. What happened? And she started crying, and she said, Mark is in jail. Mark had a wonderful job at McGee Rehab. He was studying to be an electrician. Actually, he had become an electrician after that. Was starting his own business. Was doing very well. So Mark was in jail, and I'm pretty good at looking things up. So as soon as she said that, she's crying. I can't really understand what she's saying. So I pulled up my laptop as I'm talking to her because she's saying, Nikki, I can't tell you what it's about. I don't want to talk about it. And she's just crying and going on and on. So I pull up my laptop and I look up the Philadelphia Criminal Docket website. And if you ever want to look somebody up, or if you're curious about someone being in there, you could look that up. So I looked that up and I put in his name, and instantly it came up with his date of birth, born in 1976, and I pulled up the docket, and at the top of the docket it said rape. And I was reluctant to scroll down because I thought that it might be child rape. That was my fear. Something in my gut told me that. And she's talking, and I scroll down, and I see a laundry list of charges, and at the bottom it shows that he had sexually molested a minor. And one of the charges was involuntary deviant sexual intercourse with a minor, and then about 12 to 16 charges. So as she's talking, I said, I'm going to stop you. I know why Mark was arrested. And she's like, how'd you know? And so I told her, and I said, but just tell me this. Because I knew that she married him when she already had a daughter. Her daughter was 2 years old. And at that time, her daughter was about 13, same age as my son at the time. And she had a son who was about 6, the same age as my daughter. And I said to her, please tell me that the child is not anybody that we know. And she said, I can't tell you that, Nikki, it is my daughter. And so she starts crying, and she's, at that point she's incoherent, and she tells me all kinds of things. She tells me that I know that he did it because, I found condoms in the drawer, and he told me they belonged to someone else. And my daughter told the detective that that's what he used, condoms, to make sure that she wouldn't get pregnant as a little girl. And she's saying he called me from jail, and I won't answer because I know I'm too weak. I love him, Nikki, and I'm weak, but I won't talk to him. And she's going on and on. And so at that moment, I vowed never to look for a family member ever again in life. That was the end of that for me. And I also vowed that I would, I said to myself, I'll check on her, a week later, and I'll follow up and see how things are at that point. And then I'm gone because this is too heavy for me. So by a week later, when I called Tanya, she had completely changed her tune. She was in the process of putting her home up to bail Mark out, my biological father. She had turned on her daughter and said that he didn't molest her. She's just mad because he made her wash the dishes. And this is the story she made up. And then she would say things like, but if he did do it, he's a good man, but he's just ill. And so at that point, I never spoke. Can you still hear me? I never spoke to Tanya again after that because I was just fed up. I was upset. And then a large part of me said to myself, how can you be related to someone like this? How is this even possible? And then one of the things that it forced me to do, it forced me to come to terms with my own situation. See, I realized then that my father, my biological father, who's also Mark's biological father, also attempted to groom me for abuse. I came face to face with that just by that whole situation with Mark and what he had done to his daughter. And I remember that Anthony White, my biological father, I remember that he would only see me every few years from the time that I was 4 or 5 years old, up until I was about 11 or 12. See, my biological father has a sexual attraction to prepubescent girls. So once I was 12 and past puberty, I was no longer attracted to him. But at the age of 5, I remember him showing me pictures And he's flashing through these pictures, showing me pictures of these siblings that I never met. And then I come across a picture of him nude holding a baby. And I didn't see it. He said to me, oh, I didn't mean for you to see that. Kind of put it to the side. But he meant for me to see it. And when he realized I did not see it, he showed it to me again to make sure I saw it. I remember him telling me that at the age of 5 or 6 that I should give him a massage. Maybe we could bathe together. And these are things that as a 5 and 6-year-old, you don't understand that. And I did not respond to that. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I remember being in, do you remember Kitty City? We used to have Kitty City before it's Toys R Us. I remember being in Kitty City, and I remember it was around Christmas time, he was supposed to be in town. He was this big educator, and I learned he never left town. He was always in town. And he took me to Kitty City, and I remember parents and children running up and down the aisles, getting toys around Christmas time. And he stood me in the middle of the center aisle, and he pulled out what to me looked like a really big wad of money. It could have been, just $20, but it was lots of big. And he starts flashing it, for me to respond. And I didn't know what to do. And I didn't trust him. Because my mother and my relatives, all members of Ebenezer, they did something that they tell you not to do. They talked about him like a dog, so I never trusted him. They did. How they always tell you don't ever talk bad about well, they talked about him. Oh, terrible. And so I never trusted him. So because I never trusted him, he could never trust me. So I always had that barrier. Never called him dad, daddy. I never called anybody dad to this day. He never embraced me that I remember. Never touched me. Nothing. It was strictly his only intent was to come into my life every couple of years in the attempt to groom me. And the only reason why I was not groomed is because, number one, I did not trust him, so he could not trust that I would not tell, right? Because he was never able to fulfill the grooming. And number two, I think that his desire to avoid child support was probably a little greater than his desire to molest me. So that's probably why he left so quickly. But Tony did a lot of things that I do remember. I remember him telling me a story about how in other civilizations, a child's first sexual experiences with their fathers. I remember him telling me this. And these are things that you just can't understand and can't comprehend as a child. And as I got a little bit older, when I was 10 or 11, he would do some things. It started to feel more uncomfortable at that time. Never any contact, but just a short time that he was supposedly in town, he would make sure that he said something to see if he could open the door to abuse me. And that did not happen. I remember being a little girl, and this is why I call him my biological father and have always called him that. I remember that my family, back in the 70s and early 80s, we weren't really that conscious about. We knew about sexual abuse, but it was something that was nobody talked about it. You knew there was a certain uncle, you just never go near him, they might tell you that. But nobody was proactive about protecting children. They really weren't. And today, to be honest, I don't think they're as proactive as they should be. But nobody was really proactive. So I remember Tony was supposed to be in town, my relatives, my mother raised me and my brother, who was not Tony's child, who's 5 years younger than me. She raised us in West Philadelphia, and we lived in the housing project at 46 in Market in West Philadelphia. And so I remember my family would say, Nikki, I hear your father's in town. You need to ask him to take you shopping, clothes shopping. You need clothes for school. I was about 7 by this time, I think. And I didn't want to. And I said, I don't want to ask him. And they were like, no, you ask him. That's your father. He's supposed to give it to you. So when he came to pick me up, he had me in the car, and he said to me, I got enough nerve, and I said, can we go shopping? And he looked at me, really, I remember it to this day, with almost like disgust, and he said, window shopping? And then I think he thought that was his opening, so he said, why should I take you shopping? Why should I? And I didn't know how to answer that. How do you answer it? So I said, because you're my father. And he said to me, and I'm 6 or 7 years old, and he said to me, well, biologically. And that's when I knew instantly what biological meant. And that's why to this day I only refer to him as my biological father. So after the situation with, you can actually stay there for a second. So after the situation with Mark, after I got over the initial disgust of who, coming to terms with who my father was, who his son was, and then all these things that bothered me, then I was like, this man is 61 now, or 60, well, at that time he was probably in the late 50s. I said, he has to be somewhere doing something. So I became relentless in my efforts to try and find out where Tony White was and what he was doing. I found him in Delaware. And he was in Delaware, and he started the first all-girls charter school in Delaware. I don't know if you saw this on the news. His name is Anthony White. He started the first all-girls charter school in Delaware called Reach Academy. And he had worked in education all of his career. He taught at schools. He was a principal at schools. He actually worked as a psychologist in the prison system. He did all kinds of things, but mainly around children. And I also found that he was working as he opened a state-funded daycare also at the same time he was opening the school. So he had a candy store of victims. He just had a candy store of victims. And this is just a couple of years ago. So at the same time that I was looking for him, I was following the case with Mark. And the case with Mark had been dismissed because of complainant refusing to cooperate. And I was devastated. But what wound up happening was that Mark violated the stay-away order. He and his wife violated the stay-away order because that was still in place. And he was not supposed to be around the little girl. And they violated that, so his wife was sent to jail, and Mark was, the original charges were all brought up against him again. And on December 21st, 2010, which is our biological father's birthday, Mark White was convicted of all the charges and sentenced to 32 to 64 years in prison. And I was thrilled. So, but at the same time, I'm still looking for Anthony White. So as I said, I found him in Delaware, and I got a hold of a reporter who was working on a case, who was investigating him because he was using the store as his personal ATM machine, as the school as his personal ATM machine. So they knew nothing about anything else, they were just researching some stuff about the finances. And so I made her aware of all of his past abuse, and we were able to find some things that he did. He abused every female child he had, with the exception of me. He had several. He has now started a new family with a woman who is just a couple of years older than me, and they have a teenage daughter and a school-age son. And he is 63 years old. So he has been a pedophile for 40 years and has never been prosecuted fully, I should say. Never spent any amount of time in prison or anything for this. So I reached out to the reporter. We worked together for a period of a few months, and then she wrote the story in the top newspaper in Delaware, and it was the front page news. And as a result of our efforts, and as a result of me bringing this to the attention of the media, I did a piece on Fox News. Of course, Tony denied it all, denied that I was his daughter. I mean, I think I would pick Sidney Poitier to be my father if I wanted to lie about it, right? I don't think I'd pick a pedophile. But he was ousted from the school, and I have reason to believe that he may have turned up at another school as a school psychologist, and I'm following that now. But this man has been molesting children. I found a girl that he raised as his daughter. She's 21 now. He molested her from the time she was 5 years old. She's not his biological daughter, but he molested her from the time she was 5 years old until she was about 15, and then kicked her out of the home. He had her since birth. He named her, he gave her middle name, the name Gomer, which means daughter of prostitute. It was all a joke to him. This is the biggest sociopath you will ever meet, ever find. And he's free today. Next slide, Eric. So again, my focus is strictly on avoiding, on the grooming process. The only reason why I was not molested is because I was ungroomable. I could not be groomed. And I could not be groomed because he could never establish the trust with me. He could never he could never get me to the point where he could trust that I would not tell if he did anything to me. But he did that to about 4 or 5 other little girls. He molested them terribly. And one girl was pregnant by him. It was just terrible. They've gone through unspeakable tragedy in their life as a result of what he's done. So grooming. There is a culture of silence that surrounds grooming that we have to get rid of. Because our children are dying slowly as a result of this. I mean, the stats say that it's 1 in 5 boys and 1 in 3 girls who will be molested by the time they're 18 years old. I mean, so if you look at a row full of children and count every 3rd girl, that child will be abused. I was somehow suckered into helping to coach my daughter's soccer team. And this week was the first practice, and for some reason they chose to put me with the 4 to 6 year olds, and I vowed never to go back. But while I was with these 4 to 6 year olds, I mean, I looked at them, little girls, 4 to 6 years old. They couldn't tie their shoes. They couldn't, they had to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes. They were thirsty, just all kinds of issues. And I'm looking at a little girl like this. Can she even process being molested or raped by a man? I mean, when you put it in that perspective, when you think about it and you put it in that perspective, it really brings it home to you. And I would not be standing here in front of you today if I had been molested. It's a totally different dynamic. The only reason why I can talk about it is because I was not. Many people can't talk about what's happened to them. So there is a culture of silence that happens when a child's been molested. There's the guilt. First, there's fear. There's guilt. There is shame, and this is the shame that the abuser puts on the child. Children don't understand their physical feelings. They don't understand when these things are happening to them. They think it's their fault. They don't understand why some things, as violent as it is, why some things maybe physically don't feel that bad to them. They don't understand that. So all that is guilt that they continue to internalize and take through adulthood. Now, I want to go to the supporters. Mark's wife was a supporter. She essentially chose Mark over her daughter. And he had been in her life since she was 2 years old, so we don't know how long he's been abusing her, right? But this girl's mother chose Mark over her. And we had this situation so many times. I was just made aware of a situation this week where this woman who's a successful accountant, she has a beautiful family. Her husband had been molesting the daughter, the teenage daughter, before she was a teenager. She's 14 now, and had been molesting her. And now he's in prison, and she's waiting for him to come out. She's visiting him. The daughter is living with her father, her real father. I mean, and these are the things the supporters are responsible for a lot of what these children go through. I mean, to this day, I can't figure out what kind of mother would allow this to happen. And one thing you have to understand is pedophiles and predators, they know who to choose. There's a reason why they would choose that child and not that child. There's a reason why they would pick that child and skip over that child. They look for children who have self-esteem issues. They look for children who, in many cases, are withdrawn. They look for children who don't have as much family interaction with them. And that's not always about class or socioeconomic status, because the children of wealthy and working class parents get abused also. And the reason why children get abused is not because they're good parents or bad parents. It's because bad parents and good parents just aren't watching. It's just that simple. You can go to the next one. So there is a story. There's a woman by the name of Tracy Ross. She wrote a book about her experience. Tracy Ross and the whole situation is very interesting. I'd like you to watch this video because Tracy Ross and her mother and her whole family dynamic are the perfect example of grooming, of a whole grooming situation where the mother was groomed, where the child was groomed. And I want you to see the interaction with Tracy Ross and her family. Now, before we start the video, Tracy Ross has been abused from the time that she was a very little girl. Her stepfather came into her life because her father her father died suddenly. Mother was devastated, remarried this man who seemed to be the hero, okay? And so he loved everything that Tracy loved. Tracy loved the outdoors and the wilderness and skiing and all kinds of things. And this was a man who came in who they believe saved their family and who loved all these things that Tracy loved. So what's interesting about Tracy's situation, and this is what I say about a lot of abuse victims, they can, because of the grooming process, at some point they actually feel sorry for their abuser sometimes. You know, at some point they're able to resolve the issue with the abuser. That's the part of them that's been groomed. But the part of you that is that was the child being abused, or the child of a parent, or the part of you that becomes a parent and understands what it means to protect your child, that part can't understand why your own mother didn't protect you. So it's amazing to see what grooming will do to you. And we're going to play this, and then after it, I just have a couple of questions I want to ask if you notice if you could.
What's in the muffin? What an Ellie made guffin. What could make Thomas's taste as it does? The cravings, the ridges, the batter.
After the English muffin
The
commercial.
notes that make it all matter. Ellie looked in the notes, the cravings she eyed. She took a big bite and it was mine.
And you like English muffin?
Observed her long king.
Thank you.
Agreed Ellie.
Smoking is great.
Thomas says the original was the cravings English muffin. So try the great taste. Thomas's baby, it's fabulous.
Story of a family facing a dark secret in an unusually open way. Today, Tracy Ross is a journalist, wife, mother, contributing editor at Backpacker magazine. She specializes in writing about the outdoors with a love of nature she learned from her stepfather. But as that love grew, horrible stories also. Here's Julia.
I just haven't gained that trust back.
This family is doing something extraordinary, fully airing a hideous family secret.
I don't want to be angry.
I might not be able to be around her. Because of you. A mother, a daughter, and a stepfather who molested her, struggling to pick up the pieces. They've agreed to sit down all together for the first time to grapple with the betrayal that nearly destroyed their family.
I just was oblivious. I had no clue that it was going on.
I asked myself, how could I do this and cause all this pain? And it's terrible. It's a terrible thing to have to own up to.
Tracy was just 7 months old when her real father died suddenly, leaving her and her brother in the care of a devastated mother. So when her stepdad Donnie showed up, he was like a knight in shining armor.
He swept me up immediately into fun and adventure. He had the knowledge and ability to ski and hike and do all of these things that as a kid I loved. I loved being outdoors. And he brought this effusive light into our lives.
He saved your family.
He definitely saved my family.
The man who saved her also molested her. She says it began on a family camping trip when she was just 8.
And I just remember waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like I was suffocating, very hot, and the feeling of hands, like sandpapery fingers on my body, in places that they shouldn't have been.
And you knew enough to blow the whistle.
I did.
The next morning, she told her mother.
I said, something scary happened last night, and I need your help. I don't know what to do.
Did she help?
She did not help. She called my dad. They told me that I had had a scary dream.
That was the first betrayal. She recalls a home life lived behind drawn curtains.
At some point when I entered puberty, my dad started stumbling in on me while I was in the bathtub, or I would feel him outside my window with the blinds cracked open and watching. And then he would come into my room at night when I was on the verge of sleep or asleep and molest me and do things to me that just got progressively worse. I just look at myself, you know.
And what do you see?
A little girl, you know, putting on a good face, but I was really going through hell. Like, this is the time when I knew, like, it was reaching its peak.
Now pregnant with her third child, it was only after she became a wife and mother that she was overwhelmed with the need for answers. She asked her father to go with her into the wilderness. They hiked back to that place in the mountains where it all began. Did he know you were going to confront him?
He knew we were going back there to talk about it.
And she learned more than she'd ever imagined.
I thought we were going to go and these answers were going to come out and it was going to be like this huge weight lifted off. And it was instead a huge weight poured on.
I told her I'd be as truthful on things that she wanted to know about and that she didn't know about.
He confessed to molesting her between 25 and 50 times, many more times than she remembered.
He said part of it was that you weren't always aware of what I was doing. And that's when he was used my mom's sleeping pills to kind of take me out of the equation in a way.
To knock you out.
To knock me out so that I think he felt not traumatize me more.
This new information helped explain why so many of her memories were hazy, and also why, as a teenager, she felt such an urgent need to run away.
I knew in my heart that if I didn't do something, it was going to cross the line into rape. And so I waited until my dad went to bed, and I got up and I ran away.
Tracy spent several months bouncing from foster home to foster home. Her father formally admitted to molesting her, but in private told Tracy's mother that he was only saying it to reunite the family.
Very angry with myself for thinking.
Refer to you. Even now, her mother Doris, who stayed married to Donnie all this time, has a hard time explaining why she didn't do more.
Just unbelievable. Shame at what, I didn't take care of.
Bits and pieces of confession and forgiveness have trickled out over the decades.
I liked Doris in order to end our relationship.
But it wasn't until now, with the publication of Tracy's searing memoir, The Source of All Things, that they all decided to sit down and face the whole truth as they tell the whole world.
I justified in my own mind what I was doing was okay.
Her father also has a story of abuse. He too was molested by a family member as a young boy.
It was something that happened before, and that was where my boundaries kind of was confused.
I don't know of another perpetrator who is doing what he's doing, saying, look, here I am. I'm every guy, possibly. I'm not an ogre, scary guy. And look what I was capable of doing.
Do you forgive him?
I do.
Do you forgive your mom?
I'm working on it.
You have a policy when it comes to your kids.
Yeah, absolutely no unsupervised contact. They don't spend the night at their house. They did for a time when they were younger before I really looked at it and took myself to task. For me, forgiveness is a continuum. And so when I say it ebbs and flows, there are days when I don't want anything to do with my parents. And then there are days when I say, look how hard they're trying to make this right.
3 generations embracing a dark past to find a way to a bright future. For 9/9, I'm Juju Chen in Boulder, Colorado.
So, is that interesting?
Yeah.
What did you take from that? What struck you about that? That she was willing to forgive. She forgave the abuser. Right, because the person that was groomed is reacting as a groomed victim. But the person who knows better is thinking, how can my mother have allowed this to happen? What else? Anything else? So here's my position on that. The recidivism rate with pedophiles is so great that even if you thought they could be rehabilitated, would you trust it? I mean, that's my position is that this is not one of those crimes that we could take a chance that they've actually been rehabilitated. My answer would be no. I know we're in church and I know we believe all things are possible, but my answer would be no. There are some things you just can't come back from. And there are mental health professionals. I don't view it as a mental health issue. I think it's a matter of evil. That's what I believe it is. And I know there are people who would disagree with me and believe they can be rehabilitated. But I wouldn't believe it, and I wouldn't take the chance. I would never take the chance. Anything else about that video?
I think it was wonderful as a molestation survivor. I think it's wonderful to watch a family actually honestly and openly discuss what has happened on many different levels, as well as work through pockets of healing. Forgiveness is a continuum, but to see that in action, I never saw that. And I think that was
Okay, so let me just tell you my position on that. I think that whole episode, with the exception of maybe Tracy's feelings or what she wanted to feel, I think the entire thing was dishonest. I read her book, and her mother knew exactly what was going on. On many occasions when Tracy came to her and tried to tell her, I don't want to hear it, get out of here with that. Even in one particular situation, her mother sent her to live with someone else just so she could keep her husband. So when she sat there, the first thing that struck me when I first saw this video, the first thing that struck me was how her mother, looking very weak, was saying, I may not, because Tracy was pregnant in that piece, and she was pregnant with a girl, and the mother was saying to the husband that she's still married to. She's saying to him, and I may not be able to see her because of you. I mean, it was almost, she was very, even apprehensive about saying, because it wasn't just because of him, it was because of her. She could have saved her daughter that very first night when her daughter told her what happened, and she chose not to. And then when she says, I was just oblivious, I don't know why. She knew why. She's still with him. If you didn't know then, you know now. So why are you still with him? Right? She continued to make choices. And then when Tracy says, I don't know if any perpetrator was doing what he did. I mean, he's showing that you can be that it can be anybody, You don't have to be this ogre. Well, he is an ogre. And it's not everybody. Most people would not think of doing something like that to a child. So what's interesting about that whole piece, to present it as if her stepfather was doing some great deed, he really wasn't. He wants to protect his family. He may even want to still have access to the grandchildren, which eventually she will give him again. The other thing that was interesting, remember when she said that she learned that she had been drugged? Now, did you see her reason? She was still making excuses. He drugged me to take me out of the equation so he wouldn't have to place any more trauma on me. Why did he drug her? He drugged her so she would not wake up while he was attempting to rape her. He drugged her so she would not remember what he was doing. It is impossible for a pedophile in the midst of molesting a child to also have compassion for that child. That's impossible. So, I'm going to write Tracy at one point, somehow. I haven't gotten around to it. But I'm going to write Tracy at some point because I don't want people to think that is real. It's not. The best thing you can do for your child and your grandchildren, anybody else, if you know there's a pedophile, is to eliminate yourself from him, period. And never, ever have anything else to do with him ever again in life. And that should have been the reaction. Oh yeah, she went to a foster home at some point. She, at a few points, she ran away because she thought that she was going to get, he apparently had done everything except for totally, completely rape her. So she left and went to various foster homes. But a lot of time while she was in the foster home was because her mother didn't want her in the house because her husband had to leave. There was an order that he couldn't be around her at one point.
That's what I thought it would be. Why is your child leaving your home?
Right, why
That's
does your child leave?
That's
Right.
your daughter.
Exactly. And then, he was with her many, many years. If you believe I heard everybody gasp when he said 25 to 50 times. It was much more than that. I guarantee you. It was much more than that. So here's the good news. I personally believe that the sexual abuse of children is completely preventable. I believe that. And I think that everybody who's been abused or almost has been abused or has had attempts of abuse, I think you can point to something that either your parent or whoever was your caregiver probably did not do. So I believe it's completely and totally preventable. I think it is. And as a result of my experience with Mark and as a result of the several months that I investigated Anthony White, I wrote a book. I wrote a book called Eliminating Child Predators, The Ultimate Parent's Guide to Protecting Your Children. And it was difficult. I did not want to write this book at all. I wanted to, there were many times, every time I would hear something else in the news, I just wanted to bury my head and have nothing else to do with it and just make sure that Eric and Taylor, my kids, are safe and just not even worry about anything else. Because it's difficult, it's not easy. Most abuse victims can't talk about it. So you know that it's difficult for them, and it's difficult for those of us who have not been abused to even want to deal with it. But we have to, because they're all around. They put themselves in positions like Anthony White did to be around children. They are your coaches, they are your pastors, they are your teachers, they are individuals who are in areas where they can have more access to children. And so one of the things that we want to do now is talk about why children get sexually abused. Now, children get sexually abused because, like I said, good parents and bad parents just aren't watching. You're trusting your child around people that you may know, but you're not being careful about it. You're not asking questions. You're not doing your due diligence. You're not acting on that instinct when you think something's wrong. Because a lot of times people know that something's wrong somewhere. One of the things that you have to look out for, if someone takes an exceptional interest in your child, you need to know why. Most grandparents don't have time to do as much for a child as they want to. So why would someone who's not a grandchild or a parent have an exceptional interest in your child? When the whole scandal went down with Eddie Long, I was like, these people are crazy. How in the world did they not know? Eddie Long is a mega pastor. He preaches all over the world. How does he have time to devote to a couple of teenage boys? And he has his own children and family. Why are these teenage boys getting cars? And why are they getting gifts and jewelry? And what mother is not questioning that? Everybody doesn't love your child like you do, really. They don't. So if someone is paying exceptional interest or taking an exceptional interest in your child, then you need to figure out why. I always caution single parents. I did a little research and went on a website that's supposed to help single women in their quest to find a good mate, and it always says, find someone who loves your children as much as you do. Well, you can easily find someone who loves your child as much as you do. That's easy. But can you trust that person around your child? And it amazes me. You see these children get killed or murdered or molested, and they were left with a boyfriend, left with this person or that person. And when I went to this website and I looked up all the tips that they give single parents, single mothers, not one said anything about make sure that you know that you can trust the man in your life around your child. Not one said that. And for single parents, your desire to have a man does not trump your parental responsibilities. Period. It doesn't. So if you have to go without until the last one goes off to college, then you just do. Because you never trust people around your children. You just don't do it. Unless you know for a fact. So, when the Jerry Sandusky situation came out, that was very painful for me because, I just felt for all those boys. And then, you think about the little boy being molested, and then someone walks in on it and doesn't do as much as he should have done to stop that situation. And you think about that situation, you think about these helpless little boys who had no clue, and all they know is that they're getting access to Penn State games, the locker room, all of these things. And this man had a candy store of victims with his foundation. And they were all underprivileged boys, the typical MO. Women who want a male figure in their life, in their child's life. So it was the perfect recipe for it. The Catholic Church scandal, another one. Pastor Leggett made me aware of a documentary, and I watched it. It's very difficult to watch. I'm sure he'll have the name of it. I can't recall it right now. But it talked about there were children being molested by a Catholic priest while the mother was right in the room right there. It's amazing how much trust we put in people who handle our children. So, how to create a child who cannot be groomed? How to create a child like I was, who could not be groomed? Because, and I did not mention this last time, but Tony was not the only person who attempted to molest, who attempted to groom me for molestation. We had another relative in our family, the husband of an aunt, who had molested my cousin, who was a few years older than me, a member of one of our churches. He sang in the choir, everything, molested my cousin, his daughter, all of her life. From the time, all of her young life, from the time she was 2 until. And my family, we're talking about the 70s, or she's a little older than me, we're talking about the 70s, and people knew there was something strange about it. And nobody actually did anything. And and I used to play with her. I was 11 at the time, and she was 14 or 15. But before that, we used to play, and I would go over his house. Now, everybody knew that he was like this, including my own mother. So I would walk by, and I would bend over to get something out of the cabinet, and he would swat me on the behind, or if I would walk by, he would say, where's my kiss, Nikki? And, it's just something about you that makes it feel, it wasn't like the average kiss you're giving, a relative. It was something that just felt wrong. So after this happened a few times, we were all having a big Thanksgiving dinner. My mother wasn't there. She was taking care of my little brother at home who was sick. And and we always had to get a ride home because we never had a car. So I'm trying to say his name so that in case anybody knows it. So everybody said, Nikki, you're going to ride with Pete. Oops, I said it. You're going to ride with Pete. You're going to ride with him home. He's taking you home. And I was so scared. I sat in the back seat like he was driving a cab. Okay? And I saw him looking through the rearview mirror at me, and I was just scared to death. So when I got home, I told my mother, I said, they put me in the car with Pete, and here's all the stuff that he's been saying to me and doing, for these weeks. And she was like, what? Oh my goodness. So she goes crazy. She gets on the phone. Why did you all put Nikki in the car with Pete? You know how he is. I remember hearing that. I'm like, you know how he is? Somebody should include in the 11-year-old, So from that point, it just went crazy. His wife, who knew that he had been molesting, my cousin, she said, well, Pete said he didn't do it, and he said he never wants to see Nikki in his car again, and the whole thing. And this person is still in our family. Still comes to, he doesn't come to can't come to my house, but he still comes to events and he's still around. But again, Pete was not able to molest me because he wasn't able to groom me. Because I was already made aware, or felt something, and I acted on it. So how do we avoid our children from being groomed? And these are some things that I detail in my book in great detail because I want people to know this. So you have to be consistent with giving your child positive reinforcements. A lot of these children who've been molested, they have low self-esteem. They're missing a parent like I was. Your father is the first person who affirms you. And so when you don't have that as a girl, you're really lacking something, and you look for that in other places. And a lot of times you find it with a person, whether it's an abuser or whether it's a mate in life, who's not the right person for you. So you have to be positive, you have to be consistent with giving positive reinforcements to your children. The second thing is, and this is a big one, never teach your children to trust all adults. You know, we were taught the adult was right, you know. You couldn't tell an adult if an adult was doing something wrong. You couldn't, an adult lies on you. Nobody's gonna believe you. But I taught my kids to never ever trust an adult, arbitrarily. I mean, you don't just trust them because they can be wrong. Let your children know, on that same note, that if they're telling the truth, you will always believe them. Because that's one thing that pedophiles use. You're not going to be believed. They're going to think you're lying. So you have to let your child know all the time that you will believe them. You absolutely will believe them, as long as they're telling the truth. You have to encourage open communication and ask your children about various aspects of their day every day. I always ask my daughter, my son is 19 now, he's a freshman at Maryland, and my daughter just turned 12. But I always ask them about every aspect of their day. Teachers, do you like that teacher? Why not? Do you talk to her, him? Just everything. And my kids, would come home and tell me everything. Like recently, Taylor told me, about a year ago, she told me that the teacher called her up to the front of the class and took a pencil and did like that in her eye and said, look this way, look that way. So, and then said, okay, you're okay, and said back down. And Taylor didn't know what that was about, so she told me. And I immediately emailed the teacher and asked her why she was giving an impromptu eye exam to my daughter. And she had a good excuse. But one thing that did was that put her on notice that somebody is watching what you're doing. You can't just do anything and not have a child tell. You have to be seen around the children the adults in your child's life. I cannot tell you, we've had like parties for our son or our daughter in the backyard, and I can't tell you how many people just drop off their child, I've never seen them, or the parent, they'll just drop the child off and leave. A child will ring the doorbell, I'm here for the party. I don't know them, don't know the parents. And it's amazing to me that you would do that. You don't know who's in the home, you've never met me, you never met my husband. People do that. But you have to be seen around the adults in your child's life. Coach, when your child is taking soccer or football, don't just drop off the child without meeting the coach, without talking to them, without following up. These are things that if there are pedophiles in that situation, they're looking forward to that. Okay, now I want to go over quickly because we're low in time. I want to go over some of the things that you need to do if you suspect something or if you're curious about something. So these are some things I laid out in detail in the book. Warning signs, times that you need to either get involved, intervene, or just watch a little closer. So if your child suddenly becomes fond of an adult and talks about this person frequently, it may just be a teacher that they really like, Just watch closer. No need to really intervene at that particular point. If an adult takes an exceptional interest in your child, wanting to spend more time with him or her, giving him gifts, seems to favor your child over other children, that's when you need to intervene. I mean, that's not something that any child, any adult should do. It's not a grandparent or someone that is. I'm telling you, be careful with everyone. Be vigilant. You don't have to walk around, interviewing everybody like crazy, but you need to be watching all the time. But you should intervene if somebody takes an exceptional interest in your child. Your new boyfriend or male friend wants to get to know your children better by spending time with them, taking them on outings, offering to babysit them. That's when you intervene, clearly. If there's an adult neighbor or friend or handyman seems to be too good to be true, you need to watch that closer. Facebook. If your child is interacting with adults on Facebook frequently, well, first of all, you should know what your child is doing on Facebook anyway. That's another story. I'm amazed at how many people don't know what their children are doing on Facebook. But you need to intervene. There's no reason for your child on social media to be interacting with an adult on a frequent basis. But there's something in the medical field called universal precautions. If a nurse or a doctor is treating a patient and they wear gloves, they take the proper precautions around needles and other instruments that might have blood on them, because they don't know who has some sort of blood-borne disease. It's called universal precautions. And that's the same thing that you should do with your children. You take universal precautions, because we don't want to have a rescue mission. Frederick Douglass said this. He said it's easier to create strong children than to repair broken men. And once a child has been abused, you are now dealing with repairing a broken person. And that's not what we want, ever. And so I wrote a book that I believe is a hand guide that everyone should have. And I think you should have it because whether you're a single parent, a grandparent, whomever, if you know of a single parent or someone with children, I urge you to see us at the back at the table. I believe there'll be tables set in there. I urge you to see us there because my goal is to get this in the hands of every parent, and everyone who has a child or raising children. That is my goal. Because I don't want to see another child molested. I know I can't prevent that. And I know the DA would not agree with this. My position on pedophiles is that if you molest a child, I believe that should be life in prison. I believe if there's penetration, I believe that should be the death penalty. I know that's going to be hard. Maybe you can work on it. Well, maybe it's not something that's realistic. But, that is my position. Because these are your most sacred possessions. And just like a child can't understand, a lot of the times when we tell them not to do this or not, how in the world can they understand an adult doing this? And how does that change their life? And we see this manifest in all kinds of ways now. We see sexual orientation confusion. We see mental illness. We see health issues as a result of the stress that people carry with them. And I'll just say this finally before we stop. When I was looking into how I could go after Tony, I contacted an attorney just to make sure that I was doing everything right. And he said, I can't believe this. He said, my mother, who is in her 80s, just told me that when she was raised back in Germany, she had been molested by her uncle. He said she cried on the phone with me, and she's in her 80s, and it's something that she never got over. So think about that, and think about a child, and how they never ever, you can get through it, but how they just don't get over it. And do all that you can to protect your children. Not the protection that means tell me when you've been touched, but the protection that actually stops them from being groomed. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to invite my guest. Michelle Kristofko is coming up in Montgomery County Office of Children and Youth. The assistant, Brad A. Richmond, Assistant District Attorney for the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. Detective James Angelucci from the Norristown Police Department. And Detective Mary Anders is going to be up in a moment. She is with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. I'm going to ask each one. I'll start with Detective Angelucci. They will introduce themselves again. Some of you came in before we, after we had the introductions. And I'll give them an opportunity, each one of them, an opportunity to say a word or two about whatever is on their heart to address you. Then we're going to open up for questions and answers, and you can ask any one of them whatever is on your heart and your mind. I know this is a tough subject for some of you, but I think it is absolutely a dialogue that we need to have. Because some folk have never addressed it. Some folk have never dealt with it. And there's help out here. We don't have to go through this by ourselves. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us, for taking time out of your busy schedule. You could be somewhere else doing something else. On the end, please introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what you do and why you consented to come to be a part of this program today.
My name is Detective Angel Lucy from the Norristown Police Department. I'm currently in charge of sex crimes. That's my division. I've been a police officer for 18 years. It is amazing how much of this actually goes unreported. So what we really need, especially with your children, is vigilance and definitely common sense. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Bradford Richmond. I'm an assistant district attorney in Montgomery County. Thank you. And the district attorney has placed very high priority on these cases. Actually, we're very fortunate in Montgomery County. District Attorney Risa Vetri-Furman came up through the office right out of law school and has always put a great emphasis in her career as a young lawyer in child abuse cases and child sexual abuse cases. And we saw come into fruition just in the last few years a very important development in the prosecution and investigation of these cases in a place called Mission Kids, which you may have seen in the papers. And what that does is bring together all of the agencies that deal with child abuse cases. And instead of having the social service agencies and law enforcement agencies, and instead of having them operating in separate universes and putting a child victim through repeated interviews with different people, with psychologists and with doctors and then with lawyers and with police officers. Mission Kids brings everybody together in one room so that the impact on the child victim can be minimized. They're talking to one person, but at the same time, it's very important that interviews with children who are victims of crimes be conducted within the confines of the law, the rules of law, so that when we want to use that child as a witness in the trial, ultimately, their testimony isn't tainted from the process that got them there. And so everyone is now working together in one building, and it's done in a unified way. There is one interview, and it is done with the input from social workers to minimize the impact on victims, but at the same time, it is done to the legal specifications that are required to make sure that we have a very strong prosecutable case when the case gets to trial. So that's probably the greatest advancement that we've seen in child abuse cases to date, is the trend in law enforcement to do this as a unified effort.
Hi. Hi, I'm Michelle Christofko, and I'm with the Montgomery County Office of Children and Youth. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight, and I love to hear Nicole. This is my second time hearing her speak, and the idea of being able to prevent child abuse is really the very best thing that any of us can do. That's really the goal. And I think for all of us to work together on this issue, just coming together and talking about it and making our community aware and enlightened can help, because we can't do it alone. Just as we open Mission Kids in Montgomery County so that we can all work together and be on the same page, events like this can help us work together and be on the same page and prevent things that could happen. My office supports prevention efforts in the community. We have a family center here in Norristown that helps children who are considered at risk. Doesn't mean just at risk for sexual abuse, but who need support, or families who need support. We have a family center in Pottstown that we support with all types of prevention and family programming. But largely, our office is reactive. In most cases, the reason our office would get involved is because somebody, either a professional like a doctor or a teacher or a nurse or just some caring family member or friend or relative, became aware that something has happened to a child. And so you can call our office if something has happened. Now, we don't want it to get that far. We're here tonight to make sure that you have some tools in your toolbox for prevention of abuse. But if a child is physically abused, sexually abused, mentally abused, neglected in some way, you can call the Office of Children and Youth for additional support. That's what we're here for. We investigate these cases. We coordinate with law enforcement, the DA's office, to make sure that children and families do get the best support that they can have. I started out doing direct service casework years ago for the office, almost 19 years ago, I hate to admit. But I had a caseload and worked one-on-one with children and families where there was child abuse. And when I listened to Nikki speak, it brings back a lot of memories from when I was doing that direct service work. And in fact, I carried a case where this idea of exceptional interest in a child really was in the forefront. And I got this case, and I went out to the home, and I met this dad. And, I can only describe him as, he was like Rico Suave, okay? Everyone's heard of him. That's what this guy reminded me of. And I met the mom, and she wasn't very together. She didn't take care of herself. She didn't really, clean up. She just really wasn't taking care of herself. And I thought, what an unusual match. What a strange combination, that these two would be together. And I really couldn't figure it out. And I thought, I don't really understand what's going on here. And then I met her 4 beautiful daughters. And I felt like someone was forcing my eyes open. And the shock that went through me and the concern that went through me was overwhelming. And I remember when I was talking to the oldest daughter, her biggest concern was that she wasn't being believed. And in fact, she even told me a story how he would come into her bedroom, and she had told, but no one wanted to listen. And so what she did to prove it was she put flour on the carpeting so that the next morning she could show his footsteps were there coming into her room. This is what we don't want to happen. This is exactly what we're here for tonight, to say, let's try to make sure that we can do the best we can by our children, be as watchful as possible. When there is exceptional interest, when there is something that isn't right, let's do something about it. We together can really make a difference. I'm thrilled to see you here, and I really applaud you for coming out tonight. We can make a difference. Thanks.
You've all heard from Nikki. I'm going to invite our last friend and guest to introduce yourself, what agency, what office you're with, and why did you agree to come, take time out of your busy schedule to attend the meeting.
Well, Pastor, I'm in church, so I cannot lie. I was assigned to be here, although I'm glad to be here. No. I can't lie in church. So, my name is Detective Andrews. I work for the DA's office in Montgomery County, and although Michelle said she's been here 19 years, unfortunately, I just started my 25th year. So, I started at 12, I think. I think there was like a Doogie housing program. Thank you. And you know, Mike Marino was the district attorney, so he's taking us very young. But anyway, I work in our DA's office. I'm a detective in our office, and I just had the pleasure of talking to your kids for about an hour. And hopefully we have questions, but please, I have one kid raise your hand. How old are you? And that's not normally the questions I get. So I can tell you later. But so anyway, I specialize in, I work in our major crimes unit, and I do a lot. I usually specialize in sexual assault cases, child abuse cases against, and adult cases, sexual assault cases. And as Brad, I came in during Brad's talk about Mission Kids. I had helped District Attorney Furman put a lot of the funding together to get it started. And also, although I've done it for years, but now I have the certification as a forensic interviewer. So, although now we have forensic interviewers at the center, if one of them isn't available, I can jump in and do that. I can tell you, if I never hear another story about a 5-year-old and her stepdad, I'd be glad. It'd be a great day. You know, I mean, it'd be the best day of my career if I never have to hear one of those stories again. Absolutely. So I do a lot of things too. We're part of a program called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and I'm the point of contact for Montgomery County. So we do a lot of community outreach programs, but I'm also online. I mean, you can think about back in the day, a few years ago, I guess 10 or so years ago, with the Dateline NBC stories, right? Yeah. So that was me. I was the 12-year-old online talking to guys to come meet us. We, in a 4-year period, had 55 men travel to Montgomery County to meet a 12-year-old boy or girl. Well, it was me and one other person, but so it didn't matter. I could have any persona, I could use any language, I could talk like a Rhodes Scholar, or I could talk like one of the kids out here on the street and they would come meet me. So we did a lot of good work with a lot of people off the street, but unfortunately, it's a drop in the bucket. But we've evolved somehow as the internet has also evolved, and that is not so much in the forefront really anymore. We're seeing a lot more online with the online things of sexting, of kids online. There's a lot of child pornography out there. My main focus right now is child pornography. It's horrendous. It's awful. And one of the unfortunate things is it never goes away. I did a case 2 years ago that we went to trial on last year, and these girls are going to be dead and buried, and the pictures are still going to be out there. And it's hard to get the judiciary to understand that when and not to beat up on defense attorneys, although if you would like me to, I can. But when they make the argument that it's, my guy's just looking at pictures, I find that so offensive because it's about supply and demand. It's the same with the drug trade. If people don't want it, they won't be making the pictures in the movies. And because your guy looks at it in his bedroom on his computer, he's just as guilty as the guy that's touching the kids. But unfortunately, I don't like the law, I just have to follow it and enforce it. So we're really heavily involved in that now. We're doing a lot of search warrants, a lot of pictures out there, a lot of videos. Kids are finding stuff online. There's so many websites online right now that people before that may have had these inclinations that never would have acted on are now acting on them because they have the internet. And they can do it in the privacy of their own home. So how do we fight that? I think as parents get involved in what our kids are doing, as grandparents, if you're watching your grandkids, what websites are they allowed on your house? What language are they allowed to use online? Do you know the passwords of your kids' accounts? Who installs software at your house, you or your 12-year-old? And I know that's silly, but it's reality. If you get a new software program, 9 times if you have a problem with your computer right now, who do you have? Your kid. We didn't grow up with this. They're a generation that's totally connected and online all the time. So we got to start thinking, someone like Nathan, know the passwords, show an interest. If you don't know what Twitter is, do it. If you don't know what Wicker is, and Snapfish, and Snapchat, and know what it is. I know these words sound alien. They are. Your kids are on them. Your kids are taking pictures, and we just talked about it downstairs. They're taking pictures that they're sending out, they shouldn't be taking. And I put it this bluntly to them, if it's not a picture you want you to send to your grandmom at Christmas time, or your dad to have at work, or your mom to have in her wallet to show her friends, it shouldn't be taken. The biggest misnomer out there is that it's the girls. It is not the girls, not only the girls. I've knocked on a lot of boys' doors. And it's an awkward conversation, mom answers the door, but guess what? We're going to find out what your kids are doing, know their passwords. I've had parents raise their hand and say, come on, protect it, that's a privacy issue, they have rights. I'm not speaking for this next sentence as a member of the district attorney's office. My kids live in my house. They're allowed to live in my house. It's my rules. There's no democracy in my house. It's a dictatorship in my house. So, and I'm not speaking for the district attorney's office. So I'm saying, take an interest, know what your kids do, know what your grandkids when they come to your house. Are they allowed to go on Facebook at your house? Who are they talking to? We can't be preventative unless we know what they're doing. Please get involved, take our numbers. If something comes up, call us, send us an email. We'll get back to you. So my advice is please stay involved, know what your kids are doing.
Let's give them all a round. I want to take a few minutes and give you an opportunity to ask them some questions that you might have as it relates to protecting your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, whatever. Anybody have a question? And if you do, let me know who you're directing the question to. Questions? I mean, come on, they were good, but they couldn't be that good. That there aren't any questions. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Detective. Yeah, yes, Val. Go ahead, Val.
Okay.
Your question is directed to who?
Well, it doesn't matter, any of them.
Okay.
Since this is our first program of this nature in this church, how do you, what kind of ideas can you give us as we move forward? Because my understanding is we want to do this continually to help the community. And so we've had various media to try and get a packed house because it's such an important topic. And in your experience, do you find houses half full like this? And what do you recommend that we do to help to get the urgency out there? Because apparently it's not recognized as being urgent.
Excellent question. I'm glad I asked it.
I can just tell you as far as doing presentations. Number one, if you belong to another community or you have a school or something with the Boy Scouts, please call us. We'll come and do a presentation to those communities. Number two is, and I know you're starting to put some things downstairs. I found with doing internet and cyberbullying and sexting presentations to parents, provide childcare, provide food. People come. But try and get out. If you're members of other communities, get the word out and ask us to come.
Anybody else want to address that question? What can we do? And it was an excellent question, Val. Thank you. What can we do? Because my vision is that ultimately we will have a packed house. Because we need to have a packed house. This is that important. Because I believe that one child in Montgomery County, one child in Norristown, that's sexually abused is one child too many. So what can we do to make sure we get these individuals in here so that we can share this all-important, life-saving, in some instances, this is life-saving information. What can we do to back the house?
Yeah, so one of the things that I mentioned before the presentation is that it's a difficult topic. And a lot of people have not come to terms with what's happening in their own life. Right. And it's difficult and people don't really want to talk about it. So I'm not, it has not been unusual for me to speak in situations where the house was not packed. So one of the things that I think is the issue, one of the issues is that a lot of times parents don't know how to talk to the children about it. It's a conversation they don't have. The prevention conversation. They just do the stranger danger typical stuff and they don't really go that step beyond that. I think that if we focus on having a program that we will speak to the children in their language, to give them tools that will prevent them from being groomed to begin with, to help them to become ungroomable children. If we create that kind of program, I think that what we can do is we would get more parents out and grandparents who might be interested in having their children involved in that kind of conversation. Having this, and we can probably pack the house a few times, but people, it's hard. It's a hard topic. You know, I even want to turn the channel when I see something on the TV about it. So it's hard to sit through this sometimes. So if we create a program that focuses on having that conversation with the children for them, and also teaching them how to have that conversation, we might get more people out.
Anybody else want to address that before I entertain more questions?
It just seems that it's one of these things that may spread better by word of mouth, and I know that you do a lot of footwork and you pound the pavement and you knock on doors and you spread the word, but expressing about how important this is, or how maybe it was meaningful to you, or how you might have learned something while you were here, and just doing that word of mouth and spreading the word about how we could help each other to care for our children. It's the best we can do, and all of us, I think, we've had these experiences. Sometimes the house is full, sometimes it's not, but it's always worth it, because if it's even one child who isn't a victim, we've done something important.
The other thing to throw out there, if there's a topic that you think we didn't cover, that might need a little more in-depth, tell us that too. That might be more interesting to people too.
Okay. Holly.
I was thinking about the term grooming, because you hear about sexual abuse in children and children being abused, but I've never heard the term grooming. And that's something that I think that if I had said to a person that I invited, maybe that would have made her want to come.
Right.
She was a victim, her child was a victim of a relative that was sexually abusing her daughter. And at the time, this relative is also a relative of mine, but I wasn't aware of that. And when she told me that, that's something you could have shared. I wish she had shared it. I did. See, I pulled my child away from him because he had a special interest in her.
Right, exceptional interest.
And I would have thought that this was a grooming technique, but he had a special interest in her. And I didn't know, I wanted to know why was it her, like whenever she was around, he just had a special interest in her. And I pulled her away from him. But that grooming thing, I think that would be a way to maybe share it to parents. Like, do you know what grooming is? Yes. Have you ever heard the word grooming? Because I didn't know that was what it was called. And I think I learned that today, and I think that is very interesting. It's very informational for us to know.
I'm glad that you found that informational, because grooming is that's all that I focus on. Not all, but that's the main topic that I focus on, because again, I was ungroomable for a reason. And we need to understand that not just children, but families are groomed. You know, the girlfriend is groomed. These people are groomed by the perpetrator as well. And you're right, we need to focus, and that's what I focus on is grooming. But we need to get that message out more, because you're right, when people think they're coming to this, they think they're going to hear more about the typical child abuse prevention, tell me if you've been touched, do this kind of thing, and they don't know that we're really into true prevention.
She said she would cry too much, it would be too much for her to come. But maybe if she would have been grooming part, she could think about, that maybe could have been something that she could think about with her other children.
But if her child has already been abused, she's probably somebody who needs to speak to someone else.
Right.
She needs to. We can talk to her about grooming as it pertains to her other kids, but she needs some help now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Arthur.
This question for the this return. I live in New Jersey, and a sex offender, he found guilty, go to jail, do his time. But the neighborhood is notified that you have a sex offender in the area. You Norristown have this? You Norristown that a sex offender go to jail, and let's say you move to East North, that whole block, the whole area is notified that there was sex offender in the area. You have it here?
As a result of Megan's law, Mr. Richmond, what is the process when an individual has been convicted of a crime involving a child, does time, and then is processed into a neighborhood anywhere in America? What is the process that must take place in that community when they get home? What's the time frame involving in that process as well?
Well, at the time that a criminal case is disposed, whether it's a trial or guilty or guilty plea, there's then a hearing to determine whether or not the person is a sexually violent predator. And part of the process at the time of sentencing is whether or not there were Megan's Law offenses that were part of the disposition of the case. If they're Megan's Law offenses, then the person, depending on the offenses that they're convicted of or to be guilty, there may be a period of reporting that's required where there are certain offenses that are lifetime requirements. Once that process is done, that's the end of it, and there's no longer an appellate. You can appeal.
You can't appeal.
Once you're determined to be a sexually violent predator and you're required to register under Megan's Law, that's the end of it. So it's not like you can come back in 10 years if you're a lifetime reporter and say, I've rehabilitated, I would like to be free from this reporting requirement. Once that lifetime requirement is put in place, it's in place for good. And then the individual has to report change of addresses within 10 days, and they have to report to the local authorities when they move into an area.
How quickly when they move into that area?
It's changed.
Yeah, well, so if I can just jump in for a second, Pennsylvania has just adopted the Adam Walsh Act, which is federal, and Pennsylvania, so we still have Megan's Law, and there's 3 tiers within the Adam Walsh Act, and it's still the sexually violent predator is the top, which is lifetime registration. Lifetime registration means there is neighborhood notification. You can't live within 1,000 yards or something of a school. All the daycare centers in your area, where you are notified, the schools are notified. The lowest level of Megan's Law, there is no neighborhood notification. The police know. You have 48 hours to register once you move into that township.
With the police department?
With the police department. Your neighbor across the street doesn't have to know. Now, you can go online to familywatchdog.com or the Pennsylvania State Police, put the person's name in or put your township in, and you can find out where these people live. But you don't have neighborhood notification if you are the bottom tier of Megan's. Now, they have closed some loopholes through the Adam Walsh Act. Prior to this just being adopted, you could be homeless and we could not violate you or arrest you for not registering. You could not be held against you. They've changed that. I mean, unfortunately, people are homeless. People are also homeless that are sex offenders. We wanted to know where they are. So they've closed that loophole in the act. But you're not going to know that your neighbor across the street is a Megan's Law offender unless you take action to do that.
And I think an important, Nicole said something very important too, and we can go online and we can put in our zip code and we can find out who's registered and who we might need to worry about, but really, we need to use those universal precautions. Yeah. We can't assume that the nice guy down the street who's super with our children might not also hurt them. So universal precautions. The ones we don't know about can be even more worrisome than the ones we do.
And if you look at statistically, people that have been arrested for a sex crime against a child have never been arrested before. And that's their first arrest.
First offense.
And you're not, Uncle Charlie that is just as creepy that nobody talks about. It's easy to look the guy up online and know the guy down the street's a baby. Nobody wants to hear that Uncle Charlie that makes the kids sit on his lap every Sunday is the baby.
Sam?
First, I want to say thank you to all of you for this session. When Joyce told me about it today, whatever else is on tap, this is for me. I have a 14-year-old daughter, she'll be 15 in November. I'm a product of, it happened to me, it's not going to happen to her. I want to know what I need to do to prevent that from happening to my daughter. We were in a restaurant a few weeks ago, and I talked to her about everything. And she said, Mom, she got up from her friends, they were all around the table, She said, Mom, will you walk with me to the ladies' room? I said, let's go. And she was holding my hand and she said, Mom, you must be the only mother that will walk her daughter to the bathroom. I said, you belong to me. I don't know who's around that corner, because the men and the women go to the same area, they just separate. I said, I don't know who's around that corner, and I don't know who's in that ladies' room. And I said, so, what I don't want to make her afraid, I want to make her aware. And that's why I was thinking also that it's word of mouth, because what you're doing, I'm from New Jersey, but what you're doing, we need it everywhere. And if it takes me and my daughter or whatever to prevent these things from happening, that's what I want to do. And I felt that when I was 9 years old, I didn't know enough. I didn't have enough warning because of what my mother had gone through. But I said, if I ever had a daughter and a son, I told my sons when they knew what was inside their diapers, this is your penis, and this is, and I said, if mommy touches you when you don't like it, you tell daddy. That's right. If daddy touches you when you don't like it, you tell mom. That's right. And I said, because I want them to be aware of everything. My daughter is growing up to be a beautiful young lady. The way she dresses, I have to control that. Yes. I have to make sure that she don't have cleavage all up over the place, and that everything she's got is not accentuated. I'm the mother and I'm responsible until she leaves my home. I made the sacrifice to stay single until she got to school. That's my daughter. And I don't trust anybody. Maybe from what I went through, but I don't trust everybody. So I have to still use precautions because every shut eye is not sleep. Every good eye is not home. That's right. And I have to protect what belongs to me. So I thank you, I commend you. The stories that I hear, I'm not afraid, but I know there's some things that she may not tell me. That's why I try to build it up, but I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to make her afraid, but I want her to be aware. Because I can't be with her 24/7. When she's at church and men are trying to get their hugs on, and trying, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And they had said, somebody had said to me, she won't even let me hug her. I said, respect that. I said, she don't want you to hug her. I said,
there's a reason.
There's a reason. I said, respect that. And that's the way I've taught her to be. Please don't disrespect that. That's right. But that's where I am. And that's why I just wanted to say, thank you so much. I pray that we get the same thing going on in New Jersey. I'll be 100% what I can do, whatever I can say. I have a story to be told. But because some of the parties involved, I can't afford to bring, my mother and her mother, and I have to have their permission. There's a lot I can't say, but I can tell you my story, So thank you so much for doing this because so many of us, and there's probably somebody in the room that has a story to be told to, I'm sure. But I want to thank you because this is for me.
And so to quickly answer the question that you said, like, what can you do? I think the good news is your daughter's 14, so she's, almost out of that, that age range. But one of the things that I did with both of my children is I didn't mention this, but I taught them the no secrets policy. So we never had a secret. I tried to raise my son, I raised both my kids as a vegetarian, and my mother-in-law would sneak my son like chicken. And he was about 3 or 4 years old, and he would tear the chicken up and then come back and tell me. But she would tell him not to tell him, tell your mom. So I wasn't mad about her, really giving him the chicken, but I was mad that she would encourage Eric not to tell me. And so we had a discussion about that. And as a result, you may learn every little secret that a 4-year-old has to tell you, but it's the no secret policy, so we don't keep secrets. As much as we can, as much as we can control that, teach them that early. The other thing that I did was I taught my kids a very big word very early, and the word I taught them was inappropriate. Because for me, the word inappropriate just covered everything, And so, I said inappropriate is anything that doesn't make, from little toddlers, Inappropriate is a word that, it means that anything doesn't feel right, something was wrong, somebody did something wrong, So when Eric went off to preschool, he would come home, I would say, anything inappropriate happen today? And he would say, no. And so one day I said, Eric, did anything inappropriate happen? He said, yes. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And, you know, someone took a card he was playing with, or somebody, you know, but it was a word that covered everything, and we still use it to this day. You know, anybody say anything inappropriate, you know, with my 12-year-old. Bathrooms. I've walked into men's bathrooms. Like when my husband wasn't there, my son was old enough to go into the bathroom with me outside the door, and he didn't come back in time. I would walk, you know, he didn't come out, and I'm right outside the door. I'd walk into the bathroom, you know, the men's bathroom. I've done it by accident a few times too, but I've done them perfect. So these are some things that you can do.
I just like to, and I wasn't here during the beginning part, but just to add to that real briefly is communication. And we all talk about it in relationships with your, you know, your significant other, but communication. Are you open that your 9-year-old can come to you and tell you the worst thing that you ever want to hear? I mean, if we don't want to hear that, I'm with you, but, and I do a lot of presentations to parents and say, you know, what do you do if your kid gets this picture or whatever? I get that you want to just start screaming and hollering, but you got to take that outside and do that not in front of them. Because the first time you react like that, they're going to be like, no, Mom, it wasn't a big deal. And they're never going to come back. You have to be prepared, and I tell parents a lot, like, so in law enforcement, I have to prepare for, you know, God forbid I'm at the Wawa and someone comes in with a gun. So I mentally sometimes think about it. I'm saying, well, what am I going to do? So maybe we can start thinking about, what am I going to do if my daughter comes to me and says, Mom, I got to tell you something. Are you open enough to listen to that? And if you're not, are you enough to say, okay, maybe I can't hear this, but I'll get you someone to talk to. Because if you shut down, they're never going to come to you again.
You know, you said you provide information. You didn't want to scare her. You don't want to make her afraid. But information is power. So you want to empower her. And that's what you're doing. But when we talk to our children, when we explain things in terms that they can understand, when we let them know that we are their go-to person, no matter what they have to say, you empower them.
Okay, when we were when we were all inviting people to the program, there were two situations that stood out for me. There was a couple who, when we invited them, they said, "Is this a problem in Norristown? You know, is it that bad? Why you have to have this program?" To be honest, all I could say is, I don't think it's worse than any other city, but we are trying to prevent it. The other person we gave, she said no, she don't want it because they're safe. They don't have to worry about this. My question to the panel: how do you address those situations?
I can tell you
Two questions.
Two
questions.
And this happened when we were trying to open Mission Kids. Well, that happens to those poor kids in Norristown. That doesn't happen down in Lower Marion where we're making $3 million a year. Where did we ever learn that child abuse doesn't happen to rich people? Well, child abuse doesn't happen to white people that are doctors down there looking at me like, really? I can tell you we've been in just as many houses down there than we have in Norristown. And if you didn't know, statistically, there's more sex crimes against children in Lansville than there are in Norristown. So, I mean, all right, they want to throw that out. Norristown is. Child abuse is everywhere. Cuts across every socioeconomic, every race, every religion, no matter what it is. So that's someone that has no idea what's going on. I can take a lot of houses in Lower Marion where people have asked me to take my shoes off because the maid just opened the door. And their kids are sexually abused.
Where's Steve? Who's that? Oh, right here. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I don't know. Did we?
What was the answer?
There were two questions. One, why are we having this here? Because it can't be that bad here. And two was, I'm good. I don't have to worry about this. No, I don't have this issue. As we prepare for our next program, we don't have anything scheduled yet, but this is just the beginning. When we come into contact with people who have that mindset, that mentality, what kind of comeback can we have? What can we and what should we say to them? Or do we say anything?
Well, one thing that comes to mind for me is, this is a subject that nobody wants to talk about, and it's a lot easier for us to put our heads in the sand and say it doesn't happen here. But if you look at the cases that are in the newspaper from the 5-county area, not just Montgomery County, there's a couple different categories of them, general categories. And sure, there are some cases of individuals you would look at and they look like child molesters, and you look at them and say, how did they ever get along this long without being arrested? But that's not the primary cases you see in the paper. The ones you see on the news and the ones you see in the paper are the teachers, the coaches, the choir leaders, the
pastor, the priest,
people in the clergy. And without question, the community around them is shocked. They're shocked. Who thought that my neighbor, my next door neighbor, was engaging in this? So that the fact that we feel safe, it's already been proven, doesn't mean we are safe. It just means it's under the surface where we can't see it. So I think that's one answer that you tell that person. You say, look at these stories that you're seeing in the paper. They're not monsters that have child molester written on their shirts. They're people that look just like you and me, who are in our communities and very well accepted and have this secret life that is outside our smart view.
Good. Next question.
My question is for Nikki. My question is, after taking your child around these teachers and these uncles and these aunts and these other people, how do you explain to your child, you can tell me what happened, and them not being scared and them not feeling like it's their fault? Like, what do you tell them?
Are you speaking about after something's happened? Or
After something's happened or anything, like how do you explain to them, you can come and tell me whatever they ask you to do with them, or where they go with you, or anything?
Well, okay, I'm going to address it assuming that the child nothing has happened, right? And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, your question is, how do you tell your children to be open with you about what happens with people that they trust? Is that generally your question?
Right.
Well, the first thing you should do, and communication is really the key. You have to have an open line of communication. Make it normal to ask your child what happens, when they went somewhere. So how was that trip? How was it going? Did you get to talk to so-and-so's mother much? Did you talk to their father much? Make that a part of your normal conversation, without grilling them, but make that just a normal part of the conversation. And children will eventually start to talk to you. If you make the conversation something that's regular, not something that's just once in a while. I go back to what I said during the presentation. You have to teach kids early. All adults are not always right. And some of them say things that make you feel uncomfortable. Some of them do things that may not be appropriate. But you need to tell me early if you ever feel uncomfortable. Taylor told us that one of her friends' father, he's kind of weird. He looks at me and Sydney sometimes when we were at school. He's kind of looked at us. Now, we paid close attention to that. Turns out he's just a little weird. He's, but we take universal precautions, period. Our children don't spend the night, My son's a freshman in college, so I think he'll probably be a little upset with that rule after a while. But, our kids don't spend the night generally. We don't have sleepovers. We don't do that kind of thing in someone else's home. You have to start the conversation early with your child, even as it pertains to adults. You have to tell them early that this aunt or this uncle may not be may be perfect usually, but if anything ever feels uncomfortable, you need to let me know right away.
And if by chance a child comes to any of us and discloses that something happened to them or informs you in some way that something has happened to them, there is a statewide hotline for reporting. It's called Childline. I brought a lot of brochures and informational materials with me tonight that I have available for anyone to take with them that talks about, if something has happened, the steps that you can take. And I can assure you in Norristown, I know our police and our detectives, they're happy to hear from you. So you can call the 1-800 number, you can call Children and Youth directly, you can call 911 or your local police and talk with them to make sure that the next steps get taken and that the child gets the support and services that they need.
All right, we're taking another couple of questions and then we're going to break and go downstairs. We got refreshments for you. Who's next? Right here? Go ahead.
My question
Stand up,
is, if someone's under the Megan's Law, whichever tier that they're under, is there a law that says they're not allowed to work around kids in any tier that they're under? Are they allowed to work around them?
Yeah, I don't know that that's in the statute, that they're not allowed to work with children. But I probably would be assured that if you wouldn't pass the child abuse clearance, hopefully they're not going to hire you. That's what everybody else thinks. So I know like in most schools, if you want to be a volunteer, you have to pass the child abuse clearance. So if they see that on there, they're not going to bring you not in today's day and age. They're not going to bring you. Whether that's in the statute or not, they're not allowed to work, but I can't answer that honestly.
I had to get cleared last week just to be a soccer coach. But I don't play soccer, but I had to get cleared.
Right, so if you fail that clearance, I don't know what employer is going to hire you, but whether it's in the statute that you're not allowed to then work at the daycare center, I'm not 100% sure.
So if you're at the lowest tier, is that going to come up on the child?
Absolutely. So the lowest tier, you're still going to be registered for 10 years. That's the minimum you can be registered in Pennsylvania. There's just not going to be neighborhood notification. They're not going to knock on your door and hand you a flyer and say the guy down at 123 Main Street is a sex offender. When you're sexually violent predator, absolutely you do that, which is like, yeah. So, unfortunately in our business, I think everyone should be a sexually violent predator, but I don't wear the black robe. But that is the distinction. And as Brad said, once you are declared that never can change. But after 10 years, you're 11. You're not a sex offender anymore. You can live next door to a daycare center.
And so there are some occupations that don't require a child abuse history clearance when you're applying for employment there, but many of them now do. And in fact, all of our schools, the Office of Children and Youth, most social service agencies, anyone who has people interacting with children.
And churches. We now have to do it for everybody.
For the most part, have to have their child abuse history clearance. Keep in mind, it's not foolproof. I mean, I could get a clearance today that says I don't have anything in my past that would prohibit me from working in a child serving field, and I could hurt a child tomorrow. So it's not foolproof, but it's a good step in the right direction so that if someone has that in their past, at least we can be aware of it and not line them up to be our soccer coach or our Boy Scout leader or someone who's helping at the church.
And maybe I could just jump real quickly. I had a case last year where a guy from Norristown put an ad on SinnerCity.com and put himself out there as the grandfatherly type. The kids are grown, he now wants to babysit kids. He passed the child abuse clearance because he was never arrested. He was chatting to people online, trading child pornography, and within the first hour of babysitting in the wrong area and sexually assaulted her. Took the images and sent them out to his friend in Washington State. He would have passed the child abuse clearance for SinnerCity.com. Now, he looked like Satan himself when he got there because he had to go over and take classes. But he passed.
And one more thing before she goes to her second part of the question. The state of Delaware, before I exposed my biological father, you could open a charter school in the state of Delaware and not have a background check. So as a result of my efforts, the governor introduced legislation and it passed. But before that, Anthony White was able to open a charter school, found a charter school for girls, and never had to do a background check as long as he did not make himself one of the teachers. So they changed that. So there are things that you still need to be vigilant because there are a lot of cracks.
Right. Yes.
And my second question is, if there's a child who is getting abused, like they're in a family where they're being abused by the mother or the father, and the other parent isn't listening to them, is there some type of outreach or something that they can do where they feel safe enough where they can go report that? Because if the child cannot come to a parent or cannot come to a relative, just the way they have the domestic violence cards in the bathroom for women, is there something that is offered to these children if they absolutely have no one else to go to? Is there a number, is there a safe place or a safe haven or something where they can be in contact with or reach out to someone so they can report it? And if it is something like that, what are the steps? Like, because now you have to, by law, there's maybe some red tape that you have to maybe go through because of parents and things of that nature.
There's absolutely an avenue for children who, a child can self-report, or a parent can report for them, or any other adult who becomes aware, or any other person, not just adult, but any other person. So I did bring the Childline phone number and our office phone number, but any child who cannot stay safely at home in our county would be provided foster care, a loving, nurturing foster home, or we would look for a family. But your question was if there's no family available. The first thing we would always do is look for family that's appropriate and capable of caring for a child who can't stay safely at home. But in the absence of that, then a loving foster home would be provided for that child so that they are safe. That's our first goal with every child that we come into contact with, their own safety. And then, of course, we're required through our office to work with the parents, and that would be also overseen by the juvenile court here in our county, to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to either rehabilitate or make amends or make improvements so that they can care for their children. And sometimes that is successful and sometimes it's not. And we have kids who can be successfully reunited with their biological parents. We have some kids who are reunited with other family members who can safely care for them. And we do have some kids who aren't able to return to their biological families. And we may be looking at adoption or some other avenue for permanency for them if there's no possible way to be safe at home.
Thank you. We got one last question, and then we're going to break and go down.
Somebody else has been raising their hand.
Okay, all right. We'll make these last two because we're going to break and go downstairs, and you can still ask all the questions you want.